Well, welcome to episode 5 of the What Happened at First Baptist podcast. My name is Spencer Harmon. I'm here with our senior pastor, Heath Lambert, and we're really excited because our ministry team playbook has released and is available for purchase. We have released this book as a resource for you and your ministry team. We have 10 principles for effective staff relationships that we talk about a lot here at First Baptist, and we think would be really helpful for you and your ministry team to talk about as well. It's a short book, very accessible, has discussion questions at the end for you to talk about with your team. We hope you can pick up a copy by going to whathappenadatfirst.com, and you can purchase it there for you and your team, and we hope it's a fruitful and helpful resource for you. All right, so Pastor Heath, we are here this week in our final episode of the What Happened at First Baptist podcast, and I want to talk this week about what makes a good sermon. And what's motivating this is an article that you released a couple of months ago by this, almost this very title is What Makes a Good Sermon, and you gave 5 marks of a good sermon. This is something you talked to us about at in our pastors' meetings. What are we looking for in a good sermon? Before we start talking about preaching, which is what I want to talk about today, could you just overview what you've overviewed with our preaching team on what makes a good sermon?
Yeah. So I think it's important to have some criteria because everybody has a sense of what a good sermon is. And a lot of that sense is necessarily preferential, and that's fine. That's fine. But I think if we're going to say what is a good sermon, I think we need to know what we're talking about. That's important for me and you and the people watching who have to preach. Okay, so when I do well this weekend, what does that mean? If I mess up, how did I mess up? Like, I think it's helpful to have some anchors in place. I also want to be able to, when I'm giving feedback, I'm asked to give feedback on preaching. I want to be able to say, well, here's what I'm looking for. So it's just helpful to me, and I think it's helpful to most people to say, okay, here are the things, the marks that we're looking for. And I say there are 5. The first is that it's got to be biblical. So it can't be a good sermon if it's not biblical. And to me, it is biblical when you teach the text and when you point to the good news of Jesus Christ. So it's got to be biblical. It has got to be clear. So there has to be the ability of the listener to understand what you're saying, to follow along with what you're saying. If you're saying true things, but it's not well ordered, there's not a clear structure, then you're going to lose your audience, and the true things you're saying won't actually help anybody. You have to connect. So a third mark is that it has to connect, and that is the preaching moment is highly relational. And I feel like a lot of people who want to do good preaching and a lot of people who embrace the conviction of biblical preaching, I feel like one of the main things they miss is this one, that the moment of preaching is highly relational. Anybody can go listen to a podcast, listen to podcasts. Anybody can replay their favorite sermon over and over and over again. But when people come to a spot, they've decided I could be sitting in my PJs listening to some online preacher, but I came to hear you for whatever reason. And it is highly relational. And so you have to connect with those people. You have to make some kind of relational bridge between you and them. They have to sense that you're talking to them. They have to sense that they're a part of what you're doing, and that this is something different and better and more special than just listening to content in their ears while they're walking or something like that. It has to be practical. So one of the things that I say, so this is the 4th mark, is it is wrong for people to listen to you say true things and then wonder why it matters or wonder what we're supposed to do with it. So it's actually a violation of the teaching of Scripture to walk away from a presentation of the Word of God and then say that was good, but then forget about it, not implement it in some way. So we need to help people practically implement it, help them apply it. And then the fifth mark is it needs to be passionate. So the people who hear us actually think it's a sin. I think it's a sin for people to listen to a preacher that doesn't give a sense that he's been impacted by what he is preaching. We're not reciting truth like we're reading theological convictions off the back of a flashcard. Like the truth must impact us, and that impact has to be clear. That's different than me mandating a style. One person who's been impacted by the truth might have a more subdued presentation. Another person who has been impacted by the truth might have a more bold presentation. But Martin Lloyd-Jones, he said, talking about ministers, he said, our greatest sin is a failure to bring people into the presence of God. He didn't say our greatest sin is a failure to tell people the truth. And listen, Martin Lloyd-Jones wanted people to know the truth. He didn't say that's our biggest sin. He said our biggest sin is a failure to bring people into the presence of God. Well, we don't have any power, any force of will that can drag heaven down in front of people's faces. We have no force of will that can take people to heaven. So how are we going to do that? Well, it's when we have been with the Lord. When we have been with the Lord and we become a conduit of the presence of heaven to the people, and that's what I'm calling here passion. It's our heart has been moved, and people need to have some sense of that when they listen to us preach, when they watch us preach. And if they don't, not only have we failed to preach a good sermon, but we've also sinned, in my view.
Okay, so I'm hearing the marks of a good sermon. This podcast is called What Makes a Sermon Good. And I hear someone saying, hold on, shouldn't preachers just try to be faithful? Isn't that just what we need to do? Who cares about what people think about my preaching? If people are bored with my sermon, that's their problem.
Yeah.
People rejected Jeremiah. They rejected Isaiah. People maybe fell asleep in some of their sermons. Who knows? I think preachers might hear this and think, is that what is being said here? Is that what Heath is saying? That we shouldn't care about faithfulness. We should just care about something being good. What would you say to someone who people aren't receiving their preaching really well and maybe don't think they're a good preacher, and they're saying, well, I'm being faithful?
Yeah. So I am on a jihad to destroy that.
Oh, destroy what?
That argument that you just made from this hypothetical argument. Well, I just told you the truth. I was being faithful. So,
right.
Good, whatever. I am 100% opposed to that. Okay. And I actually think, so here we go. I'll just drop a bomb here. I think that kind of argument is ignorant. I think it is prideful, and I believe it is foolish. So that's as strong as I can be. I think people who make that argument are ignorant, prideful, and foolish. I think they're hurting the church. I think they are hurting the rest of us who are trying to do faithful ministry. Here's the deal. Okay. The act of preaching is two things are happening when you're preaching. Okay, at least, at least two things are happening. But in the context we're having in the conversation we're having, at least two things are happening. There is an act of biblical fidelity happening. Okay, and this is what those people are talking about, and I'm sensitive to that. Okay, so without biblical faithfulness, you have not preached a good sermon.
Right.
Without biblical faithfulness, we're not even going to call it a sermon. That we talk about this here. Like if you're not true to the text, if the meaning of the passage does not control the meaning of your sermon, then it wasn't even a sermon. It doesn't even count.
That's right.
So the issue isn't we want something other than biblical fidelity. What we want to say is that's entry level. Okay, so you've been faithful. Great. Congratulations. And there have been times around here when I have said, let me tell you what, as an act of faithfulness, your sermon got 100%.
Right.
But then there's a second thing that is happening. Okay, so you can go be biblically faithful in your devotions. That's and you should be. You can go be biblically faithful as you're journaling today, and you should be. You can go be biblically faithful in the conversations that you're going to have with the other people in this room, and you should be. But once you stood up on a platform and you got behind a pulpit and they put a microphone in your face, and you started talking to everybody about your biblical faithfulness, now a second thing is happening. It's not just an act of faithfulness, it is an act of communication. Okay? And once you take on the burden of communication, now you have to be worried about other things besides just what the Bible says. It's not enough to simply understand what the truth is. Once they put the microphone in your face, now you're communicating those things, and you have more responsibilities than just understanding the truth. And honestly, here's another just insult to the people who insult me with that question.
I apologize.
It's also laziness. Okay, so it's laziness to do part of your job, right? If every day I came into First Baptist Church and I left at noon, you'd be like, he's a nice guy and everything, but he's just not doing everything.
That's right.
So we would say, okay, so you've studied the text and you know what the Bible says. Great, congratulations, you did half the job. Now the other half is people are going to sit there and listen to you. And honestly, this is where the pride comes in. I think it is offensive for a preacher to behave like a terrorist, and just because I'm the preacher, you need to sit down and shut up and listen to what I say, and you better like it. We have a responsibility to serve our people. Now listen, we don't have such a responsibility to serve our people that we negotiate away faithfulness.
That's right.
That would be sin. But being faithful is only part of the job. Then we have a tremendous burden to think through, how do I communicate this in a way that will prove to people that this matters? I mean, it's my job. I'm the one who was studying Ezekiel this week, not you. So it's my job to figure out not just what Ezekiel said, but how to communicate what Ezekiel said to you in a way that impacts your life. And so if you want to be biblically faithful and not worry about anything else, go journal, go pray, go have conversations with people about your biblical fidelity. But as soon as you say, I am a preacher, or people have asked you to be a preacher, you now have to marry faithfulness with communication. And if you say the act of communication doesn't matter, then I say you don't understand the job you've been given, and you need to stop being ignorant. You need to stop being prideful. You need to stop being foolish. You need to be a hard worker and figure out how to put your back into preaching a sermon that people want to listen to. When Jesus was preaching, when Jesus was talking on the road to Emmaus, were not our hearts burning within us as he taught us the scriptures? Listen, he was Jesus. He did his ministry with the presence and the power of the Holy Spirit. But it ought to matter to us that that there be passion, that there be good communication, that there be clarity in how we speak. Everybody, even the people you're representing in the question you're posing, which is not your view, but you're just representing questions that people ask. Everybody has something that they think is boring. So I would just say, well, just don't be boring. Everybody has communication styles that they think are confusing and unclear. So just don't do that. Be clear, be engaging, be relevant. There are some people who they're really good communicators and they're bad at biblical fidelity. And we say, okay, you fail. There are some people who say, well, I was 100% faithful, but I was a bad communicator. Well, you also fail. You fail for different reasons, but a preacher puts both of them together.
Okay, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of it in just a minute, but I want to ask one more question about this kind of foundational concern. So preaching is an act of biblical faithfulness, and there's skill in communication. And also, there are men that do both of those things and get rejected, and people fall asleep in their sermons, and the gospel is foolishness to those who are perishing.
Yeah.
So how do you weigh that?
Yeah.
How do you weigh, I get down on a Sunday morning, man, I preached my guts out, and there were just like 6 people on the back row falling asleep. This person was mad at me over here because I said something that offended them. And they might walk out of the pulpit thinking, I'm just a really bad communicator. And maybe they aren't. How do you discern what's happening with the responses you get to your preaching?
Okay, it's a tricky question because take 2 biblical examples. Take Isaiah. All right, so the prophet Isaiah, it's actually funny. Everybody remembers and quotes Isaiah chapter 6, where the sort of divine conversation is happening. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here I am, send me. And people talk about that passage, and they speak about it triumphantly, and they want to make a difference for the Lord. But God's response to that is, okay, you go and preach, and nobody will listen.
It's so bad.
And so Isaiah
such a hard thing.
Preached for his life. He would never be invited to a preaching conference in our contemporary setting. He would not get a mega church pastor job. Everybody thought, Isaiah is kind of a lunatic, and he says crazy things, and he's unhinged. So people didn't listen to Isaiah, and it was his lot to preach to people who would not listen.
Right.
Man, that's tough. There's Isaiah. He was faithful. You get to Isaiah 55, and it says the word never goes out and returns void. So even though nobody's listening, this word is doing its work. Sometimes it does its work of hardening, but it's doing the work because the word is cannot be anything other than effective. So you got that. Then you got the Apostle Peter, Pentecost. He preaches a sermon, 3,000 people respond to the gospel. I mean, that is like, that's the kind of response that we cannot even imagine. If on Sunday at First Baptist Church, if 3,000 people fell on their knees and rend their garments and repented in sackcloth and ashes, we'd be overwhelmed. We wouldn't know what to do. They both were faithful, but they had very, very different responses. And so we would still say the difference in responses doesn't change what we just talked about, that you've got an act of faithfulness and you've got an act of communication. And if the Lord uses your preaching to harden people, that's the Lord's job. We don't preach intentionally to be confusing or intentionally to be misunderstood. But when the word falls on the path, or as Jesus says in the parable of the sowers, or when people are blind, those are the kinds of things that's going to happen. We trust the Lord with that. We don't I'm going to be confusing and boring and put these people to sleep, so we don't do that. Okay. So then how do we evaluate it? Well, I think you have to evaluate it over time. So all of us have preached sermons where we walked away and we're like, oh, what is wrong with me? And why? I should have just called in sick today. Why did I do that? All of us have preached sermons that we thought the response might be really good, but the response was bad. And we're like, oh no, everybody's upset with me. All of us have preached sermons that we maybe thought were pretty bad. I actually have more stories about this. Thought sermons were pretty bad, and like it's high praise for it. I'm like, why did you think that was a good sermon? That was the worst sermon I've ever heard. I don't even care that it's the worst sermon I've ever. Why would you say that helped you? Because it can't have. But that's what the Lord does, He does. So I think what we have to do is we have to take the long view. All of us have preached duds. All of us have said things like, oh my goodness, I wish I could go back and redo that. Over time, I think we privilege the decision of the church over time. So this is where we don't think we have a unilateral ability to determine our giftedness. So the lone wolf guy who's just like, I'm a preacher.
Yeah.
And I'm going to preach. And I don't care what people, you hear people say that.
Yeah.
You didn't call me to preach. The Lord called me to preach. And I'll be done when he's done. Well, that's as untrue as it is true. And the kind of person who's saying that to argue against the decision of the people of God, I think is, so I think we want to be humble and over time trust our people that that our sermons are listen toable,
Yes.
you know. And over and above that, I think we trust the Lord. So one of the hallmarks of biblical ministry is every person that the Lord calls always has a job. There's no category in the Old or the New Testament for the kind of person that you'll sometimes hear, well, the Lord has called me, but I don't have a place.
Right.
That's just not, then, okay, the Lord has not called you, at least not right now. Like, we'll know he has when he's given you a spot. So I always say the Lord always gets the pieces on the chessboard where he wants them to be. And so at the end of the day, you can trust the Lord that if he has gifted you to preach and if he has called you to preach, then you will have a spot to preach. Actually, whether you want it or not. He'll see Isaiah. I mean, it might be a long, hard road, but he will sustain you in that spot. And what that will look like kind of on planet Earth at a human level is people who want to keep listening to you. And over time, if you don't have people that want to keep listening to you, then we're just going to know that the Lord, through his providence, is not raising you up to do this.
Yeah. Okay, so a minute ago you said you have to really put your back into it to be a preacher that is, yes, faithful, and also working really hard at communicating the truth clearly. So you preach every single week at First Baptist. I want to talk nuts and bolts. I honestly just want to do like preacher talking shop. Okay, so what does your sermon prep process look like? And also, how much time do you spend every week prepping sermons? I mean, there's so much to do in ministry, in the church, so many demands on your time. How much time do you spend, and what's the prep process look like for you?
I don't know how much time I spend. I really don't. I don't keep track of it like that. And it wouldn't even matter because it changes week to week. But so, there's sometimes, there's times we preach through books of the Bible here. There's sometimes you hit a passage and I've preached that 5 times. And so I've read 10 commentaries on it or 4 commentaries or whatever it is. But I it's like, okay, I'm not going to say there's nothing I could learn about that, but I'm familiar with this and I just don't need to do as much work on it. On the other hand, then, there were, when I was preaching through Revelation back a few years ago, I just needed to spend a lot of time. And I did. That was a 10 commentary book. I had 10 commentaries that I didn't always read all 10, but my test was I'm going to stop reading when I feel like I understand and I can answer the objections that are coming up in these things. And so not all texts are created equal. Not all weeks are created equal. There are some weeks, this is one of those weeks we were talking yesterday, my schedule this week just compressed my my sermon prep time. You don't want to live that way. You ultimately you need to make changes if you're not having enough time to get ready. But we also have tough weeks where it's just out of the ordinary. And so I don't know how much time I spend. It's hours, but how many hours varies from week to week and text to text and that kind of thing. And I also think you're asking me, how do you do it? And I'll tell you how I do it if we can have an agreement for everybody listening that the Bible doesn't mandate how to do it in detail. I mean, there's study the text and do the text and preach the text, kind of the Ezra model. But in the details, the Bible doesn't mandate the granular detail of how we do that, which means God has said there's freedom.
Right.
If there weren't freedom, he would have legislated it. And since he didn't legislate it, there is freedom. Okay. So what I do is I sometimes on Sunday night, so I preach the passage I'm preaching on Sunday, and then sometimes I'm just, because we have a schedule and we set the sermon schedule out 18 months here, and so I know what's coming on a week-to-week basis, and sometimes I just find myself, I'm just thinking about it, and and in theory, I'm not supposed to start until Monday morning, but sometimes I just can't help myself. And so I just go and I start looking at it on Sunday night, or I'll pick up a commentary or two and start reading it. But what happens on Monday is I want to understand the text. So I always say Monday is for meaning. And by the end of my prep time on Monday, I don't want to have any questions about the passage that I can't answer. That doesn't mean I understand everything there is to know about the passage, but it means as I'm interacting this, and I'm looking at it and I've got questions and concerns and things I want to figure out, I want to not have those by the time I'm done working. Then I move from, okay, so now I understand the passage, to what we call here the burden. Okay, so this, maybe we're preaching a chapter, maybe we're preaching a verse, but the Bible is living and active and amazing. And so I just come to the passage knowing I'm not going to be able to say everything about this. So out of all the things I could say, what is my sense from the Lord? I'm praying about this. I'm asking the Lord, show me you in these words. Show me what you want your people to hear, order what I'm thinking, order what I'm saying. And so show me, out of all the things I could say, what am I going to focus on this week and call our people to? So by Monday, I've got meaning. By Monday, I've got a burden that I'm really thinking about and praying about. And because we've got a preaching team here, like you and I talk about this on Mondays, so we're on the same page in terms of what we think the meaning of the text is, and what we think, hey, here's what the folks at First Baptist need to hear from this passage as best under God as we can tell. From there, I move to what we call the way in. What is going to be, okay, so we got meaning, we know what the text means, got a burden. Here's, out of all the things we could say, what we will say. The way in is how I'm going to start framing it to the people. So, my burden is that I really want them to see that the Lord is sovereign over the people that he's made. Okay, well, how am I going to talk about that? Am I going to talk about our weakness? Am I going to talk about our suffering? Am I going to talk about our sin? Is there a story, an illustration from something I've been reading that I think would be a good controlling metaphor? And then I start to think about, how am I going to organize the sermon? So what 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? That's starting to get a long list if you're going to preach just a normal sermon. But how am I going to communicate this? How am I going to structure it? And then I've actually, just this year, I made a change to how I'm doing my prep. I did it the same way for 15 years, and I just this year started to change it, and I think it's working out well. And what I do is I just try to write 1,000-word, what I call a sermon summary. So here's my intro, here's my 3 points, whatever it is, and I'm trying to keep it at 1,000, 1,300 words. It's not a manuscript that I'm creating, but it just gives me a chance to nail down with some language the kinds of things that I want to say, so my head isn't swimming all over the place. My self-imposed deadline to submit my notes for the sermon at First Baptist Church is Thursday morning at 11, so I want to be able to go to lunch on Thursday, and our communication team and our media team and our education team, they all need my notes for slides on the screen and for things on the internet and for things with Sunday school teachers. They need all that, so I try to get all that, so they've got the rest of the day on Thursday to be working on that. And that's when I say that's when the hard work really, really starts. And so from Thursday afternoon, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning, I am just thinking about it. I am praying about it. I pray a lot. I got a whole routine for how I pray, especially on Saturdays and Sundays for the sermon. I always say to people, if you see me, Friday is my day off, and that's mine and Lauren's date day, so we always go out for lunch for a date or to breakfast for a date. But I say, if you see me sitting like at a red light on Friday and I'm like staring and you have to honk your horn because I missed the green light, like I'm probably thinking about the sermon. I'm probably praying about it. And so it's a week-long thing that starts over on Sunday, but that's more or less how I do it. Different people do different ways, and those aren't right or wrong. That's just how I do it.
Let me quick question. Lloyd Jones in Preaching and Preachers, he talks about how sometimes it's such a good book.
I think it's the best one.
It's incredible. He has this section where he talks about that sometimes the Lord just gives you a sermon.
Yeah.
He just like, you have the outline, you have everything. Like you read that. That's happened to me a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
Has that happened to you before?
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah. The Lord just
regularly
drops it
happens.
on you.
Yeah. You know, in fact, it happens a strange number of times.
That's
that
amazing.
I wake up in the night with a sermon.
Like you have
and
the outline in your head.
Yeah, I have to write it out.
Yeah.
And then I go back to sleep. So it's one of those things where I can't even take credit for it. People are like, that was a great sermon.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what?
Lord just gave it to you.
I woke up and wrote it down. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about keeping people in mind when you're preaching. You and I talk a lot about this. So you used to teach at a seminary, and you've preached at chapels to seminary students and PhD students. You were just telling me recently that you were preaching at a church that you grew up in to a group of people there, and then you preach at First Baptist downtown. You preach at First Baptist at Nocatee. I want to talk about adapting preaching to the people that you're preaching to. How do you adjust your message without compromising being faithful and while like remaining yourself while you preach? How do you authentically adapt your message to different groups of people? Just walk us through that.
So I think, first of all, the presence of the question means you're off to a good start. And I realize you're asking questions. Sure. This is not you, but you're asking questions that other people ask. So I think there are a few key errors that people who love the Bible and love Jesus and they want to do biblical, faithful preaching, I think there's a few key areas where they just mess up. We already talked about one of those where you think all you have to do is be biblically faithful and you don't think you have to try to be a good communicator. It's just such an odd thing, but a lot of people do it. It might be the biggest one. But another area where people mess up is they don't do what you're doing. You said, how do I be me and know who my people are? That's a very insightful question because a lot of people, honestly, they do a really bad impression every week of their favorite preacher. So I like John Piper, or I like John MacArthur, or I like Tim Keller, whoever. You pick your favorite preacher. And I know because I just watched you do like a really bad impression of that person. And it's like, what I want to say to people is you have to stop. Here's the thing. Be influenced by every good preacher that you can. You should be thankful for every good preacher that has influenced you. But here's the thing. God already raised that person up and gave them a ministry. You are wasting your time to mimic them. And everybody knows anyway. Everybody knows his Piper's coming out. He doesn't act like that anywhere, but he loves to listen to Piper sermons, and so now he's just doing a Piper impression. Or he wants to be John MacArthur when he grows up, so he's just doing that whole thing. Again, people have their favorites, and you can tell because so you have to find a way, honestly, to be yourself. You have to find your path. And that's a whole other conversation, and that's not even what you asked. But it's a big deal. But then you have to know where you are. So you talked about, some of my different experiences. And yeah, it's true. Like my whole adult life, I've been teaching the Bible to people. Sometimes I'm teaching the Bible to a group of seminary students. Sometimes I'm teaching the Bible to a group of Bible college students. Sometimes I'm teaching the Bible in a 10-person PhD seminar. Right. That's a very different thing than even when you're teaching master's level students with 200 people in the room. Sometimes, I have read papers, as they call it, at the Evangelical Theological Society. The room is full of 150 PhDs who've read a bunch of books on what you're talking about. That's a completely different deal. It's one thing to preach to a country church with 100 people in it. It's another thing to preach to a downtown megachurch with 2,000 people. It's just, and here's the thing, you're being stupid. This is my offensive, we'll call this the offensive podcast. You're being stupid if you don't recognize that. Jesus did. The Apostle Paul did.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul, when he went to the synagogues in Acts, he started with the Old Testament scriptures and got to Jesus. When he went to the Areopagus, he started with the culture and all the weird, bad stuff they were doing, and he got to Jesus like that. Jesus, he knew the difference between talking to the woman at the well, Nicodemus, and the rich young ruler. All you have to do is just read the Bible. Read your favorite preacher in the Bible, and you will find people with high situational awareness. When you're doing your exegesis of a text, it matters to you when you're preaching a text that, now notice here, Jesus was preaching to his disciples. Now notice here, Jesus was preaching to the crowds. You know to notice it when you're doing your exegesis of the text. So now what you have to do is do the exegesis of your people. Do the exegesis of the room. If you know what you're doing, if you're being a faithful pastor, actually what should happen, the longer you're at a church, the better your preaching should get there. Because you're spending time with your people, you're talking to them, you're listening to them. And this is where if you're a guest preacher someplace, you ought to have a lot of questions about who is going to be here. Is this a room full of pastors? Is this a room full of lay people? Is this a room full of moms? Is this a room full of married couple? What is this? You ought to have a lot of questions about why they want you to do it. Because it's not just truth that goes out into the air. It is truth that goes out into very, very particular ears. And so you will be faithful to the Bible in the best possible way when you figure out who these people are. Now, the rule is you can never allow your awareness of the room or of the crowd to compromise biblical faithfulness, but it will meaningfully control your message. Jesus said, I have many things to say to you, but you can't bear them right now. Jesus knew who he was talking to. And he knew, like, hey, I gotta limit what I say because of where the Apostle Paul said, I gave you milk, not solid food, because you weren't ready for it. He knew who he was talking to. He knew where he needed to stop. He knew where he needed to start. And so exegete the Bible, exegete the room, and that's not an issue. That will increase your faithfulness, not diminish it.
You know what I'll do sometimes when I'm getting stuck and I'm just like in a weird spot in my sermon prep is I'll sometimes go to my whiteboard and I'll just write down 3 names of people in the church, and I'll write down like the name of a little kid, the name of like an elderly person in their 80s, and then the name of like a young mom. And I'll just envision them and be like, how do I communicate this to all of them at the same time?
That's so good. Well, and honestly, that's even so practical. I hope people really took note of that. But here's another way to do that. So you're getting ready to preach you're preaching through Proverbs, and you get to a passage about gossip. And you know 2 people who have been wearing you out on social media. And it's easy to get up and preach to those 2 people. In fact, it's really hard not to. In fact, it might not even be right to avoid it altogether, because you want the passage to interact with what's going on in your church, but yet you also don't want people to believe that when the preacher gets up, he's got an enemies list and he's going to come after him in the sermon. And so one way to balance it out is to do that very thing, to say, okay, I got these 2 people in my head that are being foolish and sinful on Facebook, but I'm going to go write down the name of that 9-year-old little girl who comes up and gives me pictures of me preaching after every Sunday. I'm going to write the name of I'm going to write the name of my wife who really loves me and would never gossip about me. And so I just force myself to remember that when I get up in front of that room, whether it's 50 people or 100 people or 2,000 people, I got to find a way to connect with all those.
Talk to me about structure in preaching. So I've listened to a lot of different preachers in my life, and I'll get up there. Some guys will get up there, and there's no clear outline to their sermon, but it still feels clear and helpful. And then I know people that are deeply structured. I mean, it's like point 1, sub point A, you know. How hard should we work on that in preaching? Being structured, do we need 3 points? Do we need it alliterated? Like, how much should guys obsess over making sure it's really structured?
So you need a structure. You have to have a structure, and the reason you have to have a structure is because, in those 5 marks of a good sermon, clarity is important. And so structure helps with clarity. Orientation is the gift you give your hearers to know where you are and why you're there.
Okay, explain that a little bit. We've talked about this before. Orientation.
Orientation.
What do you mean by that?
You can't follow a written document or an oral presentation if you don't know what they're saying, why they're saying it, and where they are while they're saying it.
Okay.
So as is writing, in writing you say, hey, we need a thesis statement. I'm going to say, here's my argument, and here's how I'm going to argue for it. We need something like that in preaching. So I want to tell people, here is what this sermon is about, and here is how I'm going to tell you about it. Actually, Erwin Lutzer is very, very helpful on this. You should look up Erwin Lutzer, and he talks about unity, order, and progress. So, like, we're preaching one sermon, unity, but there needs to be order in it so that there's a clear structure, and it helps people to know that we're making progress.
That's good.
So, so I think it's very, very helpful to remember when you're framing your message to frame it in a way that people can follow. There are a number of ways to do that. You could. I think this is a little. I think this is a little bit lazy, but there's a time and a place for it. You could just go verse by verse. Say, we're in Romans this week. It's Romans 1, and we're in Romans 1 through 6, and I'm just going to go through the verse. Well, I can see progress. I know what he's doing. Okay, he just got done. Now let's go to verse 2. I generally don't recommend that, but it's not wrong. It's not wrong. I just think there's probably not, in most cases it's not best, but it's not wrong. And so if you love doing it and you want to send me an email, you don't need. I agree that it's just. And I want to be clear. I think we need structure, but I think there's room at how to do that. So you could go verse by verse. Another thing you could do is you could say, "Let me give you a sentence to remember." And if you boil the whole sermon down, here's the sentence. If you live your life in the flesh, you will die. But if you live your life in the Spirit, you will live. Now let's turn to Galatians chapter 5. And so then, people are like, okay, this is the statement that he's going to work through, and I'm going to do it. The most typical way I do it is with the arrangement of plural nouns. So I say, I'm going to give you 4 reasons why you need to trust the Lord in suffering. Or let me give you 3 truths about justification by faith. Or let me give you, I usually don't go below 3 just because I believe in the Trinity. I don't know.
That just got really heavy.
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
I feel bound.
So I usually don't go below 3, and I really believe I'm gonna just have everybody there for an hour and a half if I go over 5. And so there's something about the 3 feels like kind of a magic number for me, but plural nouns. And so then let me give you. Let me tell you 3 reasons why Jesus is wonderful from this passage. Reason number 1, and then I talk about it. And then reason number 2. Some people will give all the points early on. I sort of think that feels a little too lecture-y and a little too classroomy. First is this, second is that, third is that. And also I think there's a little bit of narrative tension. I want to keep you listening. I don't want you to think you got everything in the first 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 3, and you're going to have to wait until we get to that. So I think there's a little bit of drawing people in with that. I think you have to have some kind of structure. I think that's just serving your people. Do they have to rhyme? Do we have to alliterate them? That if you can do that and you can make it work, I think that's fine. Sometimes that can be distracting. Sometimes our efforts at alliteration make us come up with zany words and now it sounds cute to us, but it's not really communicating.
It's too cute.
Yeah, nobody knows. I don't know what that word means, or I do know what it means, and it's just distracting because now I'm thinking about the stupid word just because it starts with S instead of the passage. Sometimes you're just easy to have 3 words delay, and love.
I had a friend that said sometimes your rhetorical flourish is your listener's eye roll.
That's right. That's right. And so how much oomph we put on the structure is up for debate. And honestly, it'd be good for you to get some feedback on how that's going over. I don't know if you're going to ask me questions about sermon review, but I think sermon review is tricky. But if you can get some feedback every now and then, I think that's helpful. But I think you have to have some level of structure that is obvious to your people. And here's just one commendation. One of my favorite things. So I'm preaching to very normal people at First Baptist. We've got some PhDs in the room from seminary, but we also have stay-at-home moms, and we have car mechanics, and we have people who own restaurants, and we've got 9-year-olds. And I love it when a 7-year-old comes up to me.
It's the highest compliment.
And says, Pastor Heath, when you said this, I really appreciated it. And one of the things that I hear all the time at First Baptist is, do you know why I love your preaching? I can think of so many.
I'm sure that's exactly what you say.
But tell me why you know.
Oh my goodness gracious.
But seriously, do you know why I love your preaching? Because I can take notes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. And here's what they're saying. They're saying you give us organizing principles. They're saying you got structure in it, and I can follow it.
Yes.
Nobody wants to know this is just life in the real world. At 11:55, nobody wants to be disoriented about where we are in the sermon. They want to have a sense about, is this thing landing, or do we have another 20 minutes here?
Yeah.
So
when you were preaching at Nakati back in the day every Sunday, there's something that would happen that I noticed about you that I want you to tell me if this is still how you do it. I would watch you, and you would always have your little half sheet of paper, which was like an outline that you're taking into the pulpit with you. Often, I would watch you, and you would let's say this is your outline. You'd put it on the pulpit, and you'd start preaching, and you would never look at it.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
You would never even look down at the pulpit the entire time. You're maybe behind the pulpit or beside the pulpit, but you're just looking at everybody talking. And I couldn't figure you out. I couldn't figure out if you
Neither can my wife.
I couldn't figure out, is he an outline guy?
Yeah.
Is he a no notes guy? Did he write a manuscript and memorize it? He didn't seem like you were memorizing it. So this is a thing preachers always talk about. No notes, outline, manuscript. What do you recommend? What do you do?
Okay.
You just told me too, you kind of write a blog post, which feels manuscripty, but you're not taking that with you into the pulpit.
Well, no, and here's the thing. It's not a manuscript, because if you read it, I mean, it might be 1,000 or 1,200 words. If you read it, you'd read it in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not a manuscript. I mean, a manuscript would have to be like 6,000 words, 7,000 words, 5,000 words, depending on some people write 10,000 word manuscripts, and everybody's going to be in trouble.
Unless your name is Jonathan Edwards, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So what do I recommend? Okay, so I want to be careful because here God leaves us free, on this, and there are manuscriptors who are better, more famous, more impactful preachers than I will ever be. And so you said manuscript, outline, or no notes. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll walk through those, and I'll just explain the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Great.
Okay, so manuscript, which is how I started. So my first sermon in the late 90s was a manuscripted sermon on Acts chapter 2. Not the whole book, but a couple verses in Acts chapter 2 that I manuscripted. And here is what you get with a manuscript. With a manuscript, the good part is you can't say you didn't prepare. Like you wrote out what you were going to say. Now, you might be unprepared in other ways. You might not have prayed up, you might not be prayed up. You might not have done enough study in the history and in the language and all the rest to really know what you're talking about. But in terms of knowing what you're going to say, you're not open to the charge of a lack of preparation. And you have sorted out what you're going to say. That's actually connected to a problem that's coming, but more on that in a minute. The other thing that you get with a manuscript is you get precision. So if your goal is to be precise and say the exact right thing in the exact right way that you had planned, then it's right there. So all you got to do is read it. So that's what you get with manuscript that's good. What is bad about a manuscript is you damage your connection with the people. So remember I said one of the marks of a good sermon is you got to connect. Like people have to believe that you're with me.
Yes.
People have to believe that I'm not just like something is happening here that's different than if I had the AirPods in. And that takes eyeballs. And so one of the things I talk about here when our team of guys are preaching, one of the things I do, you have a manuscript, I'm not going to legislate that. But one of the things I do is when you put your head down and I can tell you're looking at that manuscript and you're looking at it hard and I start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I start counting. I've had people where I get to 19 or 20 and I'm looking at the top of your head. That's no good.
Yeah.
It's no good. This is not a public reading of a manuscript. This is a sermon. If you want to have your manuscript, that's fine, but you cannot have the manuscript at the loss of connecting with the people. And here's what's going to happen. When you're looking at people and when you're like consciously, like I'm doing this in front of the Lord, I'm doing this in front of these people. Lloyd Jones called this freedom. He called this freedom. You're going to get freedom to say things that you had not prepared.
Yes.
Now, there's a lot of hardcore manuscriptors that just heard me say that, and they're like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. Well, so I'll just invoke Lloyd Jones again and say Lloyd Jones, who he did different things. He didn't just have one way that he did it. But freedom is a good thing to see people's faces, like to see, like I got these people back here crying because, and not because it's 12:20 and they're hungry, but it's like the Lord's doing something.
That's right.
And you can see, and you know what this is. This could sound, I'm not a mystic at all, but you know what this is when you're preaching and all of a sudden words are coming out that you did not plan on. Words are coming out that you didn't even think about.
Burdens are happening.
But it just like the Lord is doing something. And so if you are just having a relationship with your manuscript and the people just happen to be there,
that's right.
That's not a good way to do a manuscript. Okay. Then there's outlines. So this is the way. So I quickly moved away from manuscripts and went to outlines. And this is what you were talking about. And what my rule for about 15 years was that I would have the outline of the sermon and a few things underneath each outline, scripture references that I wanted to be able to use. I would put that on there. But my rule was I would only take into the pulpit what I could fit on one side of one half of an 8.5 by 11. So you take an 8.5 by 11, you fold it in half, and whatever fits on that one side, that's what I take. Because a manuscript's too much. It's too many words there. And here's the thing, if it's there, you're going to want to look at it. It's a crutch. So if it's there, you want to look at it. But if it's the outline, it's like, okay, I don't want to be up there and forget. So I'll have that with me, but I don't want to have to be fumbling with papers. So I'll just set it next to my Bible. And then what you're saying, the thing about an outline is you get the prep, but you don't have all the words that are drawing you down, messing up your connection with the people. Then this year, beginning of this year, I made a change, or maybe it was the beginning of last year. Now all of a sudden I can't remember. Maybe it was when, we started Genesis this year. So I said, when we start Genesis, I'm going to do this differently. And so now what I do is I do this 1,000, 1,200 word sermon summary. And it's got all my notes and all my outline. And then what I do is I get a paper copy of that after lunch on Thursday, and I just tuck that into my Bible, and I just read it, I review it, I use it to help me pray. I don't memorize it. So I don't, that's part of the, so some people, so you memorize. I'm not a memorizer. That is not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is be thinking about the categories of the sermon. I'm using it to help. I want to think about it. I want to pray about it. Then on Sunday, I just leave that. Sometimes I leave it at home. Sometimes if I think I'm going to have time to pray, and I've got a vestry back behind the auditorium here at First Baptist, if I'll have time on Sunday to review, pray in my vestry, I'll take that with me. But at a bare minimum, I leave it on the pew when I preach, because here's what I realized. I just don't need it. I realized that I'd been thinking about this since last Sunday. Yeah. I've been praying about it. My heart is just there, and I was taking it in there as a crutch. And here's what I would say is the risk of preparation. Whether you use a manuscript, it's maybe riskier for that, or outline, or heavy outline, or light outline, or whatever you do. The risk is you think, I need to say this the way I said it on paper. It gets in so many people's heads. I need to say this the way I said it on the paper. Well, where'd that come from? Where'd you get that? Why? Like, what I want to say is, I want to be thinking about the text. I want to be thinking about the Lord. I want to be praying about this. And then the sermon's the sermon. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do, so many of us are tempted to rely on ourselves in the moment of the preaching. We want to rely on lofty words of wisdom that we wrote down instead of a demonstration of the Spirit and of power. So I want to be real careful. I'm not trying to overly moralize it. I think you could have a demonstration of the Spirit and the power with a manuscript. But for me, this is just for me, I realize, you know what? Part of my trust in the Lord means I'm going to go up there without a crutch. And it's going to be me, the Lord, and the people. And I always stick with my outline. There have maybe been a few times where I've been like, all right, something is about to go down here, and I don't know what it is. But that is rare, and I don't do that very often. But for me, the reason I do that is because it maximizes preparation. But it also maximizes connection and just trust in the moment. And Lord, do something that I haven't planned. And there's just nothing. When you're a preacher, you know this. There's nothing more exciting in life than when you're up there and something's happening that you couldn't have planned, that you didn't plan, and the Lord is just doing it.
Since this is the Lloyd Jones podcast, he called that the romance of preaching. You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, I know we're going a little long, but let me just ask two more questions and then we'll land the plane. All right, you preach the sermon. You're evaluating the sermon. And we talk a lot about this, reviewing, preaching. I remember a couple years ago, I was like, Heath, I want you to listen to like 3 or 4 of my sermons, and I just want you to rip me to shreds. I know you love me. I know I'm called to preach, but I want to get better. That's one thing. But I've heard you say some pretty critical things about like a weekly sermon review where everybody's evaluating your sermon. I think a lot of guys who are preaching in an effort to be humble and get feedback, they have implemented some sort of sermon review process. I've heard you recommend away from that. Yes. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's a real mistake. So again, I want to be careful not to overly moralize because the Bible doesn't weigh in on these things with specificity.
Right.
And so that means there's freedom. It's not an accident. It means God is saying, you do you kind of thing. So and I appreciate the motivation behind sermon review. We want to put up a mirror and we want to have feedback, and we all need feedback.
That's right.
We really all do. And ultimately, we're going to get it. I mean, sometimes it might be when we lose a job, but you're going to get feedback on your sermon. You want to be able to help it. And so they want careful feedback. And I understand all that. And listen, I know who I'm talking to, because in our world of like, we take preaching seriously, and not just preaching, but biblical preaching, and not just biblical preaching, but expository preaching. Yeah. And in that world, there are a lot of people who you almost can't even draw a line between sermon review and expository preaching. This is the way we do it.
Yeah.
And so I know what I'm touching here, but I really want to encourage people not to do that. I really think it's a problem to do it. And there's a number of problems with it. I'll talk about 2. It is a problem for the people who are doing the sermon review. Okay, so if you're on your church's sermon or your pastor's sermon review team, and just every Sunday afternoon or every Monday morning, you're one of the guys who has to sit around and you have to go over, here's what happened. That is training your heart to sit in judgment on the preached word.
Yeah.
And that is a dangerous thing to do. You are really toying with something. And as a matter of fact, it is not your job under any normal circumstances to sit in judgment on the preached word. It is the job of the preached word to sit in judgment over you.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you're going to do damage to your heart. You're going to do damage to your family and to your Christian life if you think it's your job to sit there and write down just commenting on the presentation.
Right.
Take notes about what you're learning and where you need to grow. But if you think now it's going to be my job to get in a room with this guy and tell him what he did right and did wrong, that's a really dangerous reality, I think. The second danger is it's a danger to the preacher, because what it trains the preacher to do is to preach to the small crowd of sermon reviewers. These 8 people, these 4 people, these 3 people, these 10 people, I'm going to have to go in a room with them, and they're going to knock me over the head for ever how long, or they're going to whatever. Well, here's the thing. You're probably going to pick people who are of above average intelligence, who are of above average theological education, who are above average in their opinions and the freedom they feel to express those opinions. But here's the thing. That's not the church.
Yeah.
And if you train yourself to preach to make that group of theologically prissy folks happy, you might be alienating the stay-at-home moms and the 8-year-olds and the nursing home administrators and all the public school teachers. So I think what the risk is that it creates a very dangerous and potentially prideful echo chamber that you would do well to avoid. That doesn't mean don't get feedback. Listen, if you mess up, at First Baptist Church, it's impossible that I would mess up big time and nobody would tell me. It's just impossible. That's not going to happen. And then the other thing, about once a year historically, I go into our pastor's meeting and I say, hey, listen, I want you to tell me how I'm doing. Tell me how I'm doing. But it's a trend question. It's not let's look at this sermon and squeeze it, pull it. It's a trend. How are we doing? Where do I need to do better in the trend? Where do I need to, that kind of thing. And so there's ways to get review and feedback without subjecting yourself and a small group of people to a practice that I think actually probably does more harm than good.
Okay, let's land the plane. Land the plane here. I want to talk about power and preaching. So we talk about this a lot. We've already touched on this a couple of times, that we want as preachers to walk into a Sunday morning preaching moment honestly set on fire by what we are about to communicate. Honestly, preaching is impossible in one sense. I feel this every week. There is this big, huge gap between the burden of what I want to see happen and my ability to pull it off. Yeah. And you just live there every single week as a preacher. And what we want is power. What we want is the Lord to do something that surprises us, that surprises our people. We want him to do something wonderful. Can you just talk about pursuing something that feels impossible for you yourself to create as a preacher, which is power and freedom and change in the preaching moment? How do we even begin to pursue that kind of thing in preaching?
Okay. I probably think about this more than any other thing I think about in ministry, because I just told you, from Thursday to Sunday morning, I'm praying for this kind of thing. I'm praying for my kids and I'm praying for my church, but it's just the constant. This is what I'm praying. I don't start praying on Thursday. I start praying on Monday, but it's more like, Lord, teach me what this means and help me apply this to my heart. But by the time we get to Thursday, I'm like thinking about, okay, the act of standing in front of everybody, and I want
Right.
the Lord to do something. I don't want to walk up there and give a talk. I don't want to walk up there and say some true things
Yeah.
and feel good about myself because I was faithful. I want the Lord to show up.
Right.
This is the Lloyd Jones podcast. Maybe we'll name it that. But I am so gripped. I think about it all the time. In fact, 2 Sundays ago, I was so burdened. I went back to the book where I read it, and I just read where he said that our greatest sin is failing to bring people into the presence of God. And I'm like, Lord,
I know.
I don't want to be that guy that fails, and
Yeah.
but I can't do it. So you got to do it. So, so let me talk about some ways that I think about that. Okay, so first of all, I think the presence of a burden helps. So not just here's this text and what are all the true things, and let me give some kind of weird theological outline and just talk about all kinds of true things. But I think, hey, I want to focus like a laser on something in this, and that doesn't mean we only talk about one thing in the passage necessarily. But if I'm thinking about, okay, I want God to show up to our people.
That's right. Yes.
That's what I want. I want you to know that Jesus is real, and so that burden doesn't just mean, okay, now it helps me organize my presentation. It's fueling my prayer. So we've got, we've agreed that our burden this week is we want people to take a bold step of faith for the Lord. So now all of a sudden I'm praying about that, and I'm praying like I've got to go, okay, Lord, I am not going to go up there and tell people to do something that I haven't done. So Lord, what do I need to do? And now here we're recording this on a Tuesday, and I think I know, and it's scaring me to death. It's scaring me to death. And I'm like, okay, so maybe scared to death means this is the right thing. Or what I think is being scared to death is like, Lord, I think I need to not just like do this thing, but I need to ask you to make it happen. I need you to do it. So burden, I think, really, really helps. I also think that we need to do something. We need to do something, and it's going to be a different thing for different people. We need to do something to actually live out that we are depending on the Lord to do a thing and not ourselves. So one of the ways that I do that is I try to, in fact, I spend a massive amount of spiritual energy on this, certainly in the hours of Sunday morning before the sermon. I don't want to memorize what I say. These are things I've been thinking about, so I want to go in. Spurgeon called it like a thought for thought and not a word for word. That we talk about that like Bible translation, but Spurgeon talked about I've got the thoughts that I want, but I haven't memorized word for word. And so many times people are watching me build things live and in person, even though I've worked on it for hours, because just in the room, something's happening. So for me, that's one of the ways that I can trust the Lord. Lord, these are your people. This is your church. I am your servant. This is your word. Jesus is your son. So I'm not going to have memorized this thing or take this manuscript in there. I know the kinds of things I want to say. I know what the burden is, but that's me. Other people have, maybe somebody has to take a manuscript in because I just get flustered in front of people and I lose my train of thought. And so maybe the way I can trust the Lord is like, okay, so Lambert made me nervous because I think he's watching me on the podcast and he's made it to 21 as he's counting, looking at the bald spot on the top of my head. I just got to trust the Lord. I can't worry about that because I've got to be faithful. So you've got to find a way. What is it where you are going to self-consciously trust the Lord and not yourself when you go up to do it? I don't know. I actually have a lot of thoughts about it, but that's a couple things. I'll tell you, this past Sunday I was a guest preacher at a church, and I don't remember the last time I was as annoyed with my effort as I was this past Sunday. I was annoyed. I mean, I felt like I'd totally blown it. And I was frustrated, and there was stuff I wanted to say that I didn't say. and there's stuff I hadn't planned to say that I did say, and we've talked about times when that happens when it's exciting. But I look back, and I'm like, I don't even know why I said that.
Sure.
And I just was annoyed that I said it, and I was annoyed. And honestly, there was one thing that was so important for me to say that I didn't say. That so help me, if I'd been at First Baptist Church, I'd have gotten back up there and I said, "Hey, listen, I got one more thing I want to say to you," because I was so annoyed because I wanted everybody to hear about it. But I was a guest and I wasn't in charge, and so I just had to sit there, and now nobody knows. And I was so annoyed, and I just felt like I had blown it. And then for hours afterward, I did nothing but talk to people who were crying, and the sermon meant so much to them. And it's one of those things where I'm like, no, it didn't. No, because I just preached it, and it was a dud. I'm telling you, it was a dud. And but it mattered to people.
Yep.
It mattered to people. And so I got back to where I was staying, and I sat down and I was like, okay, you know what, Lord? It's not me. It's you. And even when I don't feel it's sort of the opposite when you feel like you did an awesome job, but nobody responds, and you're like, what's wrong with everybody? Like, I just crushed it, you know? And then I'm like, I totally blew it. And literally, I talked to hundreds of people. They were like, oh my goodness, that was so incredible. And I'm like, how could that be? Yep. So it just, honestly, when you get down to it, I tell that story for this reason. You have to trust the Lord.
That's right. You
have to really trust the Lord. And if the Lord has raised you up as a preacher, then he will do things that you can't see and things that you can't understand. And there will be power that didn't come because you asked for it, that didn't come because you're really good. It'll just be the Lord blessing your effort. And when you trust him for that, you can let whatever happens happen, and you don't have to sit there and be annoyed like I did after that one sermon.
That sounds just like the Lord to use us in our weakness and to remind us all the time that it's him and it's not us.
Not me.
Well, thanks for talking about these things.
Well, thank you, Spencer. And actually, I also want to thank you because if you're watching, you can see, but if you're listening, you can't, that I am holding a switchblade. A switchblade made by your wonderful son, who I love. And I actually know he loves me because he made me this switchblade.
Lots of effort.
And if you're watching or listening, you could be confused because if you're watching, that didn't look like a switchblade. And if you're listening, you're like, how did this kid make a switchblade? But your little boy makes weapons out of cardboard.
It's
and
true.
He made me a switchblade because he believes I need a switchblade. And so thank you, and tell your wonderful boy that Pastor Heath appreciates it.
He'll be so excited that you talked about it.
And he made the podcast.
He did. He made the podcast. This is our...
I would say hello to him, but I don't know how you feel about saying your kid's name on...
His name's Wally, and he's great.
Wally, I love this switchblade, and I'm going to use it on your daddy. That's what I'm going to do.
That is a great way to wrap up season 2 of the What Happened at First Baptist podcast. We hope this has been a blessing to you as we're just trying to talk about ways we can lead our ministry teams, ways we can do ministry that would bring glory to Jesus and be a blessing to your people. We hope it's a benefit to you. And thank you so much for joining us for season 2.